Now, Judge Dredd is one of the releases of the week. Now,
Dredd, not Judge Dredd. Either Dredd 3D or Dredded, as people appear to be calling it.
Okay. The thing is, we have previous on this, and an email from W.R. Logan points this out. Dear Judge and Jury, Simon and Executioner Mark, back in the annals of time when both of your good selves were still on Radio 1, I won 2 tickets to see Judge Dredd, courtesy of your show. The year is 1995, and after being a Judge Dredd fan since its first comic appearance in 1977, the 18-year wait for Dredd to transfer from comic to screen is nearly over. I get to travel to London to see it early. Anticipation and excitement levels are very high.
This email is going only one way, isn't it? I can
Sadly,
see
the excitement soon wore off. After the first 10 minutes and still holding out hope, the slide into a deep gloom began. Fergie was hopeless as a comedy sidekick. Dredd looked like he was the new member of the Village People, and his catchphrase was annoying to say the least. I wasn't too fussed about the removal of the helmet, as we all knew it was Stallone underneath, but it came off far too soon. 17 years later, 2000 AD, and Dredd have survived the damage of 1995, and last week I was at another advanced screening to see the latest Dredd film. It's introduced by Alex Garland, the film's writer, producer, and Carl Urban, and they both took time for photos with the audience, answered all the questions, and at no point seemed to be looking for a way out, with the gathering of Dredd fans having plenty of questions and asking for photos. I look forward to Mark's review, but as a Dredd fan, this was everything the first film wasn't. The story, characters and film as a whole is what I'd waited 35 years for. Finally, I'd like to say that I hold neither of you responsible for that darkest of days in 1995. If I hadn't won the tickets, it would only have delayed the resulting gloom by a week. So it was a big Radio 1 movie. We were saying, ta-da! Come and see Judge Dredd, everybody. And then, okay. Yeah. Sorry you had to see Judge Dredd, everybody.
Yeah, the problem with the original Judge Dredd was directed by Danny Cannon and, of course, starred Sylvester Stallone. And the problem was that they, essentially, in casting Sylvester Stallone, they had a star, and therefore they couldn't do Judge Dredd because they had to take the helmet. So I think it's about 12 and a half minutes before Judge Dredd commits the absolute mortal sin of taking the helmet off and it revealing himself as Sylvester Stallone. And every single Judge Dredd fan in the audience goes, no, you can't do that. Years later, I interviewed Sylvester Stallone in a car park in Cannes, in one of my worst Cannes Festival experiences. And Stallone said, the problem with that film was that I walked out on the set dressed as Judge Dredd and nobody laughed. Everyone was taking it seriously. I thought, we've got a problem. And that was the problem.
That's a new impression. That is slightly Woody Allen, but
I've worked with
Woody Allen with cotton in his mouth. Cotton wool in his mouth.
It's Sylvester Stallone meets Woody Allen. Anyway, so this time they've attempted to solve that problem. Story this time, obviously, still based on the comic book. Carl Urban as the eponymous anti-hero, futuristic, increasingly lawless mega city, policed by judges who are judge, jury, and executioner. Dredd is tasked with breaking in a rookie who has super psychic abilities but may not be up to snuff. So the story is they're then called to a tower block where basically you've got bodies dropping from the ceiling. They're called there to investigate murder. When they get in the tower block, it turns out that the tower block is the place where a drug called slow-mo is being made. Slow-mo, which makes everything go at 1/100th of ordinary time, so your experience time is very, very extended. Once they're in the tower block gets shut down and they're then stuck in the tower block and they have to work their way out. So on the plus side, obviously, it's a huge improvement on the Danny Cannon movie, partly because they've got round the problem of casting a superstar whose face you have to show. Carl Urban's a good choice. I mean, when they cast Sylvester Stallone originally, I remember everybody saying they should have cast somebody like Robert Zadar, who has a chin but no ego. I mean, that's what you need for the Judge Dredd role, and that is solved. Also, the fact is this time around you've got Alex Garland doing the script, and he's somebody who appears to actually have a reverence for the original, which is very, very important. And it's directed with a tougher edge, a harder edge. I mean, certainly none of the sort of I mean, you don't have Rob Schneider as the comedy sidekick, which was absolutely unbearable in the first film. There are, however, problems. The problems are that, one thing, it's in 3D, and the 3D is nowhere near. I mean, it's spectacularly sort of retrofitted 3D. We don't need the 3D there, and it's a real shame. And loads of people have written in to say, I've been trying to see it in 2D, and I can't. It appears to be showing almost entirely in 3D screenings. I think that really is a problem. The 3D visuals are not doing it any favours at all, and only showing it in 3D, making it very, very hard to see it in 2D, is not great. Secondly, the slow-mo drug, the drug that slows everything down. I'm not the only person who have commented on this. For some of us, it does remind you of that Chris Morris spoof about a drug which he made up, cake, which ended up there was questions in the Houses of Parliament about cake, this drug which made time slow down. And it's impossible, I'm afraid, to watch the film without thinking, there's a Chris Morris gag in there. There's also the biggest problem, which is that these things happen coincidentally, but the plot is very, very close to the plot of The Raid. You've got the people, they're in the tower block is shut down, they have to fight their way out. The problem with that is that as soon as you have The Raid in your mind, you start thinking about extraordinary, graceful, balletic, really well choreographed action sequences with extraordinary physicality and a depth of character which you don't have here. Whereas The Raid's action sequences were very, very light on their feet, this is very, very heavy in its galumphing boots. Whereas The Raid's action sequences kind of left you breathless, this leaves you merely a little bit deaf. Whereas The Raid had characters doing this extraordinary physical choreography, this just has huge explosions. And that's not to say that there isn't stuff in there that's impressive. I mean, I think this film cost about $45 million, which is not very much by huge blockbuster standards. But then, of course, when you compare it to The Raid, which cost $1 million, it's a huge amount of money. Then, of course, when you compare it to That Sinking Feeling, which cost less than £3,000, admittedly back in the 70s, it's a staggering amount of money. So I think what you've ended up with is something which is clearly and definably an improvement on the original. Although it is hard to think how something could have been more of a letdown than the original, they've certainly remained truer than the Danny Cannon version was to the comic. It actually looks like they care about what the comic book fans themselves think. I have to say, I didn't find it thrillingly engaging. I didn't find it rip-roaringly exciting. And the problem for me was, if you bring up comparisons with The Raid, albeit by accident, and The Raid is in your mind, you do look at something like Judge Dredd and think that is a great galumphing, weighty thumper of a movie, as opposed to something which is inventive and light on its feet and exciting and exhilarating and visceral. So not a complete stiff, much better than the Danny Cannon version, but I still think we're not there in terms of getting Judge Dredd on screen.